here. I got a lot out of ICR. I've never been, and I was blown away by all the presentations, and learned a lot about a couple of companies I'd love to do business with, and just in general, had a great time. So thank you for your time there.
Well, it was interesting to hear retailers' points, right? Because I think there's I probably was asked at least 24 times, are we going to a recession this year? And as I'm taking out my crystal ball, but I think that everyone's trying to figure out how to fund the projects that they want to do.
Yes.
With, kind of what they have allocated, but they're realizing that they don't necessarily have enough to fund everything they want to do. And so I think that's why it was so interesting to see, some of the conversations that we had with, really the C-suite and LogicSource. And they're like, wow, this is interesting. I didn't even know, right, that you had this. So maybe tell us how the conversation has changed with, whether it's the CEO, the CFO, et cetera, from last year to this year already, because I do feel like there's a directional change. And then I have a follow-up to that.
Yeah, agreed. I think last year the sands kept shifting under their feet, and CFOs were having a hard time forecasting, and nobody knew what tomorrow was going to bring, what was around the corner. And this year, folks seem to be stabilizing on something's coming that's going to be potentially negative. So let's dig in and be more efficient. And I think bad is okay and good is okay, but instability isn't okay. They freeze. And I'm seeing already here in 23 that CFOs are getting more definitive. CEOs are trying to figure out how to fund those projects, as you've said. And what I found interesting at ICR was everybody talked about operational efficiencies, but I didn't hear one plan. I just heard, hey, it's one of our top 4 initiatives, but nobody said, I've got a team on it. I've got someone assigned, I've got a timeline. I didn't hear that. And I think they're all going to need to turn these great PowerPoints into action immediately.
Well, I think the question that I saw that kept coming up was who owns this, right? Because it goes across disciplines. And so this idea of kind of like the either cost takeout, efficiencies, operational efficiencies. And I think in some ways, everyone's looking for the, silver bullet, magic fairy dust, whatever you want to call it. And I think that's in some ways where LogicSource comes in, because you can help, I think, raise to a fairly senior level some of the inefficiencies, cost savings, et cetera, that they're not thinking about day to day.
Yeah, I think a couple of things there. One, it's very hard from within to analyze how efficient you are, because no matter how hard you try, you kind of can't see the forest for the trees when you're in your own organization. This is why we have financial advisors, because it's the age-old, someone who was defending himself in court as an idiot for a lawyer. Well, it's the same thing when it comes to financial management, and I think having an internal stakeholder try to drive efficiency projects is really challenging. They have to be sponsored by the C-suite, and I think what we found over 14 years of doing this is CFO is key. And it's not that chief procurement officers aren't awesome and don't have, what it takes. The problem is that in typical organizations, a chief procurement officer can't tell a CIO or a CMO what they can and can't do. A CFO can. And I think that's key, is having that top-down mandate to say, we are going to be an efficient organization. We're going to push and challenge our suppliers and the things we spend money on to unlock EBITDA enhancement or fund future innovation.
Yeah, it's been, like I said, it's been a fairly consistent theme where I think that, especially if you work with a lot of chief, innovation officers, chief strategists, right? There's a lot, right? I mean, we're here at NRF, we're just at ICR, right? There's a lot of new technology and innovation that, they're like, we at least need to do a POC or something like that. But going back to, I think the CFO is increasingly using the word no. And so, which I think is their prerogative. And so there's this new idea around kind of like found money. So, we talked about, right, retail media, data monetization, but then looking at the costs you have, what you can consolidate, use a different vendor, just thinking about things in general. Like you said, it's really the CFO who's the one who's got that purview.
Absolutely. And I think, organizations large and small have to attack goods not for resale in general to unlock profit improvement. Just walk the floor downstairs and all this great innovation, how are you going to pay for it? And one of our CEOs, I think I told you the story at ICR, when I first met with him, said to me, boy, when I first took this meeting, I thought this was a total waste of time. Indirect procurement, GNFR, that's priority 99. About an hour into our meeting, he said, I really thought this was a waste of time. And now that we've spent time together, it is priority 99, but it'll fund priority 1 through 4. So I don't want my team doing it because I don't have enough resources. I want you guys to go do it and go get me the money so I can fund the things I need to do. And I think that's the key, is this area of goods not for resale or indirect procurement is always under invested in the enterprise, and it can unlock unbelievable profit improvement without breaking it, which I think is what's the critical part.
Well, also too, isn't easier for them. I mean, I think it's right. That's why folks hire consultants and whatnot. Oh, it's them, right? They're the ones who are making these decisions to take these costs out. Do you find there's a bit of that? And then also, when you're explaining, at least internally, some of the, let's just say the ahas you've had, how do you lay that out so that they can kind of communicate that internally in a way that, seems, heartfelt and whatnot?
Yeah, I think the first thing, there's a big misconception in the space, and I think it's been caused by a lot of consultants. Everybody and their brother is a profit improvement consultant these days, and having been a consultant in the past, and not one now, consultants don't buy anything and they don't do anything. So they tend to sell really expensive PowerPoint and just take out a hatchet and say you can cut here, here, and here. And that, interesting, again, doing this for 14 years, we find about 65% of our cost takeout comes from incumbent suppliers. Which is interesting, without changing suppliers. It's just giving those suppliers a bigger basket, making sure you're paying the right amount for things, I think is critical. And it's not about necessarily cutting. And I think a lot of CFOs are taking the hatchet to staff, and your scarce and high value resources, aren't the place to start when driving profit improvement. Try to keep as many people employed as you can. Let's take the money out of our what we're paying to our suppliers. And look, there was a lot of price gouging in the last 2 years. There was some legit inflation, but there was a lot of price gouging, and we got to unlock that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was very honored to at Retail ROI, the Retail Orphan Initiative, where there's, a big give back. And in the whole kind of presentation was like, we're talking about live streaming, right, the store associates are so important. But, we understand, right, there's an expense, there's training, which is time and expense. And so I said, but, so if we start to think about how to fund that, right, because you don't, right, they're very valuable, right, they're your, in some ways, right, they're your marketing team, right, when people are in store. And so, but going back to, right, figuring out where do you either have duplication, where you can be more efficient, right, you're buying, I mean, if you can remind us, like how, if you look at the companies who are your clients, how many dollars are you aggregating in terms of spend?
So it's interesting. Goods not for resale or indirect procurement is usually around 20% of revenue. Wow. So it's a big number. And there's usually somewhere between 5 and 15% of unlock in that area. So you're talking about very large, pools of investment dollars. Our clients are typically in any given year saving between 15 and 70 million. And again, it's coming out of negotiating better from a more intelligent place with your suppliers. So it drops directly to the bottom line, right? There's no negative impact of it. And I think there's a misconception that a lot of it has to be takeaways. It doesn't. Just our procurement partners within our clients are understaffed, period. So they may do a credit card processing deal every 5 years. They may do a waste management negotiation every 3 years. We're probably doing 27, 28 waste management deals this month. Wow. So frequency in market and intellectual property and data are so key to unlocking this. And our clients aren't funding their internal teams to be able to do this.
One thing I thought that was interesting that came up at ICR was where you and I were talking to a few executives, and there was a little bit of confusion over what exactly is goods not for resale. So can you remind us? Sure.
So you think about, we have clients like Tractor Supply and Lulu and Gap and designer brands and Big Lots, and, I can keep going. We don't buy anything they sell. So, we buy we negotiate and buy all the stuff they don't sell that enables them to sell. That's things like marketing, packaging, store development, facilities maintenance and repair, distribution logistics, IT, corporate services like benefits and legal and temp labor and things of that nature. And that's all the stuff that just keeps the business open.
So there are a lot of questions around fabric. How do you, where do you put that in terms of cost?
Not me. There's better people than that than us. So you think about a merchandising department that will be potentially hundreds of people that know how to buy those things all over the world, and that's what our retail clients spend their scarce resources on. We don't do that. That's their intellectual property. They better be the best at that because that's their brand promise. We do all the other stuff that is not as sexy, but you have to do.
Well, and that's the thing. I think because it's, it's like supply chain, right? I mean, it's not sexy, but the amount of dollars you can unlock, the people in the organization who can continue to be in your organization because you found, these dollars, it's pretty significant. So once again, if you look at, kind of the last few years, right, during the, crisis and the pandemic, where did you find cost takeout opportunity, and how do you think that changes as we're, kind of continuing to get back to what we were doing in 2019?
Yes, so it really is across the board. It's interesting when we look at our savings, and so we might have a client that has 160 projects this year. That there may be one number. We're going to take $47 million out of the business, but that may be literally 150, 160 projects that add up to that amount. And the savings come from all over. We've seen savings in health benefits. We've seen savings again in credit card processing, packaging, distribution, logistics, IT. There can be a lot of waste in things like IT, where you have software maintenance licenses, you're paying on licenses you're not using. There's been a lot of COVID interesting stuff that's still laying out there where people aren't coming to work the way they used to, but we're still paying for things like toner in every office and things of that nature. But the savings really do come from all over the enterprise when we get into one of these client situations.
It actually is interesting. I mean, the fact that we're also paying for offices to be open where you may not need that, or if there's a way you can share hot desk or whatnot.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is, could be really significant, especially when you look at real estate costs for some of these guys.
Absolutely.
So as you kind of think about is there like a profile of a customer, just as people are listening to this, where they're like, gosh, that sounds like me, where you find like the biggest cost takeout opportunity?
Years ago, I would have said, a couple $1 billion and up in revenue would be the right sweet spot for us. But we've launched our technology business, One Market, and One Market is a 5-module SaaS platform that is now standing alongside of our professional services business. So One Market allows us to go smaller and help earlier stage companies buy like the big guys. So let's say in our retained professional services business, our clients are 2 to 50 billion. And because, again, that 20% of revenue, it's meaty spend that you can go, but before we opened our software business, bringing in LogicSource to a $200 million company was like bringing in an excavator to plant a geranium. You were going to create more damage to the, so just now I'd say from 500 million up, we can provide real meaningful value from a technology perspective or a services perspective or both.
It's really interesting when you think about too, right? The access to resources, to consultants that a lot of these smaller companies have is not necessarily at the level that they need in order to grow, especially in this choppy environment. And so having kind of LogicSource, One Market as a resource is huge.
Absolutely. And I would say to anybody listening, be careful writing a check to start a cost takeout initiative. And if you have a firm coming in telling you that they can add value, you're asking if they actually buy anything. Because a lot of these folks will come in and do analysis for you and just put 10% on everything and then leave. And you're left with what you knew before they started. You don't have the resources to do this yourself. You don't have the data and know-how. You don't have the benchmarking capability. You need to make sure you have an execution-based partner that can come in and help you actually go get the money and make sure your CFO agrees it's in the P&L, because that's what a savings is, not a piece of PowerPoint. The CFO saying it's hit the P&L.
So if you think about that, is there a characteristic, and after you identify these opportunities, who is kind of helping with not only the execution, but just making sure everything's the trains keep running on time?
Yeah, I would say the linkage with FP&A is absolutely critical, because I've never met a finance organization that didn't roll their eyes when we talk about procurement savings. They're tired of lost savings reports and identified savings, very bad word in our business. So partnership with FP&A is critical to make sure that the projects that we're working on actually find their way into the P&L. And also typically finance is partnering to make sure that the other executives in the organization play along and help those projects come to fruition.
All right, so we're going to wrap up. As you think about your experience at ICR and now at NRF, what's different than what you expected, and is it good or bad?
Oh, I didn't expect this question. I can't believe the scale of NRF. I've never been,
yeah.
And I'm blown away by the scale. I'm it's hard to meet anybody here, but it's just incredible. And retail is alive and well. Clearly, people have been predicting the death of retail for years, and you walk through here, and it is not dead. I think ICR, watching all the CFOs and CEOs present their outlooks for 23, I think it's going to be an interesting year for retail. I think there's some rough seas ahead. But I was really blown away by the leadership of all these companies. And I think there's a lot to be excited about in 2023 as it pertains to the retail segment in general.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I will say, and then I was also at CES, you know, as we look at what retail is thinking about, right, they're looking at kind of new channels, more ways for you to help and leverage your bit. Like we're seeing this like retailization of healthcare. And so, right, they're starting to bring in, I mean, it goes back to, right, they're starting to bring in new sources of revenue and new ways to either partner or just new lines of business. But it's areas that they haven't worked in before. They may have, you know, kind of, you know, concentric circles, but we're seeing that. So that I think is really interesting, because that to me is the market really where you have a lot of opportunity to take out costs. And then as we think about, right, you're starting to see people get back together in person for the first time. In some cases, I mean, right, we're here at NRF, it's been amazing to see people who haven't seen each other. Well, number one, they've never met each other, right? Or number two, they're seeing each other for the first time in 3 years. And that's been like seeing that. So, and once you get back together, right, we've all had, you know, kind of our individual experiences. They're all looking at their companies different now and what it means and, you know, who you want to be in the future. So Dave, I've learned so much from you in terms of how to, you know, these, right, we of course, I love to help retailers find, you know, technology solutions to really make a difference. Right now, I think there's a challenge to fund those. Yeah. And so if I can be like, have Dave come in and like, let's help us fund this.
Let us pay for them.
It's really fun.
Well, and we'll do all the work up front on our nickel to show them what's possible. So I think that's key too.
That's it. Well, you're taking a lot of work off their hands. You're showing them a number, and then you can go ahead and execute it. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. Thank you for joining us. So great to see you 2 weeks in a row.
Appreciate it. What are we doing next week?
Take care, everyone. Thank you.